So in today's class, we will discuss about the Hinshelwood's theory of unimolecular reaction. Okay, so remember what is a unimolecular reaction? It is a reaction involving only one molecule of the reactant. Okay, so generally reactions such as decomposition reactions or cis-trans isomerization falls into this category of reaction. And remember one point, the unimolecular reactions that we are discussing are the one which are taking place only in gaseous phase. So the mechanism that we are describing now is applicable for a unimolecular gaseous reaction. So Hinshelwood, he proposed a theory of unimolecular reaction. Rather, his theory is a modified version of the earlier theory, that is the Lindemann's theory of unimolecular reactions. Because of certain limitations of the Lindemann's theory, Hinshelwood, he proposed a new theory, and this new theory is not a complete new theory, it is a modified version of the Lindemann theory. So Hinshelwood's theory is a modification. Okay, it is a modification of Lindemann's theory. Okay, so let us brush up. Okay, in brief, what is the Lindemann's theory of unimolecular reaction and what limitation of the Lindemann's theory made us to move on to a new theory called as Hinshelwood's theory of unimolecular reaction. To say in brief, the Lindemann's theory consists of two steps. Okay, the Lindemann's theory consists of a unimolecular reaction to take place in two steps. In the first step, two normal molecules of A collide with each other and the energy is exchanged between the molecules during the collision. So one of the molecule gets energized, and he assumed that the translational or kinetic energy of one molecule is transferred as the vibrational energy of the other molecule. So when I say an energized molecule, it means the molecule is in higher vibrational energy compared to a normal molecule, and the energized molecule may either lose the energy by colliding again with a normal molecule. Okay, therefore this first step is rather a reversible process. Okay, where the first step or the forward step represents the energization process, whereas the backward process is a de-energization process. So K1 and K minus 1 represent the rate constant of these two processes. So these two processes are physical processes not involving any chemical change. Okay, so the energized molecule may get de-energized by colliding and losing its energy with a normal molecule, or it may pass on to form the product. Okay, so K2 is the rate constant of the product formation step. So by using this simple mechanism, by applying the steady state approximation, he was able to explain the indefinite order of a unimolecular reaction, and by using the limiting cases, that is when the concentration of the reactant is very high and when the concentration of the reactant is very low, by considering these two limiting cases, he was able to show that the order of a unimolecular reaction varies between first order to second order. Okay, when the concentration of the reactant is some intermediate value, the order of the reaction is somewhere between 1 and 2, which we call as indefinite order. So though this mechanism or theory is successful in explaining most of the aspects, experimental aspects related to unimolecular reaction, the theory failed to explain two important points, which are, according to Lindemann, there should be a particular concentration labeled as A 1 by 2 or A half, which represents a concentration of the reactant where there is a transition of the reaction from first order to second order. Okay, and he was able to show that the value of this concentration where the transition occurs is equal to K2 divided by K minus 1, or it is given by the maximum value of a first order rate coefficient represented as k infinity 1 divided by k1, and the value of a half, okay, the value of a half predicted by Lindemann's theory, is much higher than the experimental value of a half. Okay, so the value of a half that was calculated theoretically by Lindemann was much greater than the experimental value of a half. Since this quantity is an experimentally determinable quantity, it was suggestive that the error in the prediction of the value of a half should be from k1. The value of k1 predicted by Lindemann was much less than it should have been. Okay, actually Lindemann used collision theory. Okay, Lindemann used collision theory to predict the value of k1, that is the rate constant of the first step, that is energization step. And according to collision theory, the rate constant of a process k1 is z1, okay, that is the collision frequency, number of collision taking place between the molecule per unit volume per unit time into e to the power minus ea by RT. Okay, where ea is the activation energy involved for the first step or the forward step. So he used this equation, that is collision theory, to predict or estimate the value of rate constant k1, and this value of k1 calculated by Lindemann is very much less than expected. So the very low value of k1 is the key factor that results in very high value of a half predicted by Lindemann's theory. So we have to make this value of k1 much high. If the value of k1 becomes much high, then the value of a half significantly decreases, and at a certain value, the value of a half predicted by Lindemann may become equal to the experimental value. So we should try to make the value of rate constant k1, the theoretical value of k1, as high as possible. Okay, so because this results in much lower value of k1. This was the one of the problem that is involved in Lindemann's theory. The other problem that was observed in the Lindemann's theory was it was unable to explain the behavior of the plot of 1 by k1 versus 1 by a. According to Lindemann's equation, the plot of 1 by k1 versus 1 by a should always be a straight line. Okay, so this is the theoretical prediction. It should always be straight line at all concentration of the reactant. But what experiment suggests is that the straight line behavior is observed only at low concentration of the reactant, and the experimental values deviates from the linear behavior at very high concentration of the reactant. So there is a deviation of the plot from linearity at low concentrations of the reactant. So this is the experimental obtained plot. So this deviation cannot be explained by Lindemann's theory. So to overcome these two limitations, Hinshelwood proposed a modified mechanism of unimolecular reaction. So most of the steps involved in Hinshelwood theory is almost the same, but he made some minor modifications in Hinshelwood in his mechanism. The main aim of Hinshelwood was to somehow increase the value of k1, because he too understood that the higher value of a half predicted by Lindemann's theory was due to the lower value of k1. So if we make this k1 to have very high value, then we can significantly lower the value of a half. So he proposed a mechanism wherein one can estimate a much higher value of k1. Okay, so let us first write the mechanism that was proposed by Hinshelwood. Lindemann's mechanism involves two steps, whereas the Hinshelwood mechanism involves three steps. The two of the steps are almost identical, but there is a significant difference in the way a unimolecular reaction proceeds according to Hinshelwood, though both the mechanisms look almost one and the same. Okay, so according to Lindemann, he actually distinguished the molecule as an energized molecule and an activated molecule. So according to Lindemann, a molecule are of two categories other than the normal molecule. There are of two categories. One is called as the energized molecule and the other is called as activated molecule. In Lindemann's theory, we had only one type of molecule, okay, that is energized molecule. So here Hinshelwood made a differentiation between energized molecule and activated molecule. So Hinshelwood made a distinction or distinguished an energized molecule from an activated molecule. Okay, so both this energized molecule and activated molecules are having higher energy compared to a normal molecule, but how this energy is stored in the molecule is different in an energized molecule and activated molecule. So let us understand the meaning of these two, okay, by writing the mechanism of Hinshelwood theory. So the step 1 involved in this mechanism is same as Hinshelwood, so as Langmuir, okay, Lindemann. So in the first step, two normal molecules of A collide with each other and form an energized molecule and a normal molecule of A, okay. And again Hinshelwood assumed that upon collision the energy transferred between the molecules is such a way that the kinetic energy or the translation energy of one molecule is transferred into the vibrational energy of the other. So this molecule A star is called energized molecule. So the A star is energized molecule, okay, and this energized molecule upon collision with another molecule of A may lose its energy, okay, it may lose its energy and become de-energized again. Okay, so the forward step is the energization step, the reverse or the backward step is the de-energization step, as we had in Lindemann's theory. However, according to Hinshelwood, this energized molecule in the second step, okay, may be converted into an activated molecule, okay. It is represented by the symbol A dagger or a double dagger. This is the symbol called as double dagger, okay. So an energized molecule is converted into an activated molecule, okay. So this is A star is energized molecule, a double dagger is an activated molecule, okay, and this is associated with a rate constant K2. And finally, in the third step, this activated molecule will pass on to form the final product. So the rate constant of this may be taken as K3, or it is sometimes written as K dagger, okay. So the mechanism involves three steps. So the important point here one should understand is the definition of an energized molecule and an activated molecule. Both are having higher energy compared to the normal molecule, but how the energy is stored inside the molecule is quite different. So first let us try to understand the Hinshelwood definition of an energized molecule and activated molecule. So A normal molecule can become energized when it undergoes collision with another molecule, and upon collision the translational energy of one molecule is converted into the vibrational energy of the other. So when I say an energized molecule, it means that molecule is in higher vibrational energy state. Suppose if I take a molecule something like this, okay, some schematic I am showing containing several bonds, okay, some molecule I am showing, okay. Don't worry about the valency of atoms, this is just a random example. So you have some complicated molecule where you have atoms connected by different sorts of bond, and in a molecule we know that the energy is stored in different forms which we call as degree of freedom. The energy of the molecule may be in the form of translational motion, which is called as kinetic energy or translation energy. The molecule as a whole may be rotating about an axis, which contributes to its rotational energy, and the bonds present in the molecule, the various bonds present in the molecules may be subjected to stretching or bending, which contributes to which results in the vibrational energy of the molecule. So the energy of the molecule is stored in its different degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom means the different types of motion a molecule can exhibit. So an energized molecule is a molecule in which this energy that the molecule has gained has been stored in form of the vibrational energy. So these bonds are vibrating with higher energies compared to a normal molecule. So according to Hinshelwood, when the molecule gains excess energy, say for example E, due to collision, this energy E, okay, which is stored in the form of excess vibrational energy, is distributed maybe equally or unequally among all the types of vibrations present in the molecule. So if there are S number of oscillators or vibrators, okay, S number of vibrators or oscillators, this S represents the total number of vibrational degrees of freedom, and you know how to calculate the vibrational degree of freedom for a complicated molecule. Use either 3n minus 5 or 3n minus 6 rule to calculate the number of vibrational degrees of freedom, which is nothing but the number of vibrators or oscillators present in a molecule. So when a molecule gets energized, it means it is in a higher vibrational energy state. Suppose E is the energy gained upon collision. This E is stored among the different vibrational degrees of freedom of the molecule. So in this case, this energy E is distributed among S number of different vibrational degrees of freedom, and this energy may be stored equally or unequally. That is, this energy may be stored in equal amount in all the vibrators, or in some vibrators more energy may be stored and in some less energy may be stored. So this is an energized molecule. In energized molecule, this energy is stored in all the different degrees of freedom equally or unequally. So this vibrationally energy, this molecule which is having higher vibrational energy, all the bonds will be vibrating, either it will be stretched or it will be bending, okay, and after a certain instant of time, what will happen is all this energy, the excess energy that was distributed among the different vibrational degrees of freedom, now gets concentrated on one particular oscillator or one particular vibrational degree of freedom. And which vibrational degree of freedom it gets concentrated? It is that vibrational degree of freedom uh, corresponding to the bond that has to be broken in this particular chemical reaction. For example, in the unimolecular reaction, suppose if this particular bond has to be broken, so what will happen is the energized molecule, after performing lot of vibrations, undergoing lot of stretching and bending, all those excess vibrational energy that was stored among all the oscillators, S oscillators, get concentrated on this particular vibrational degree of freedom, and as soon as all the energy, excess energy, gets stored in the particular bond of interest. Okay, then what happens is the molecule becomes an activated molecule. Okay, so this is an energized molecule where the energy is stored among all the vibrational energy levels. For example, E1 energy is stored here, E2 energy is stored here, E3 is stored here, E4 is stored here, E5 is stored here, so that E1 plus E2 plus E3 plus E4 plus E5 is E. So this molecule may become activated after certain instant of time, where the molecule, after performing a lot of ziggling, that is vibrations, all this excess energy E will be stored in the one particular oscillator corresponding to the bond that has to be broken during the chemical reaction. And when all this energy gets stored in the oscillator of interest, we say that the molecule is now activated. Okay, so both energized molecule and activated molecules have same excess vibrational energy, but how this vibrational energy is stored inside the molecule is different. In an energized molecule, this excess vibrational energy is stored equally or unequally among all the vibrators. It is distributed among all the vibrators inside the molecule. But in an activated molecule, an energized molecule may become activated molecule after a certain instant of time, when these energies gets concentrated on one particular oscillator of interest. Okay, that is the bond which has to be broken. So according to Hinshelwood, an energized molecule may become activated after certain instant of time according to the second step of the reaction. And finally, since this particular bond is now highly vibrationally active, and this bond is therefore highly weak, okay, or is highly weak, the reaction may take place, and finally the activated molecule may lead to the formation of the product. So Hinshelwood, he distinguished the energized molecule and an activated molecule. However, there is no such distinction made in Lindemann's theory. Okay, so this is the main important difference that that Hinshelwood proposed in his mechanism. Now let us go into some mathematics. We will skip the derivation part of all the mathematics, and we will consider only some important mathematical steps that was derived by Hinshelwood. Okay. Now we understood that overall rate of the reaction depends on the concentration of the activated molecule in the reaction mixture. Greater the number of activated molecule, greater should be the overall rate of the reaction. That is, greater would be the rate of formation of the product. And this activated molecule is a consequence of the energized molecule. So we have more number of energized molecule, greater is the chance of this energized molecule to be converted to an activated molecule. Okay, so if we have larger number of energized molecules, and so we have a larger number of activated molecules, and therefore greater should be the rate of the reaction. So the overall rate of the reaction depends on how fast an energized molecule is formed and how fast this energized molecule gets transited to an activated molecule. Suppose during collision an energy of E is exchanged between the two molecules, and how this energy is distributed among different oscillators present in a molecule. Okay, so I will take a molecule, some complicated molecule like this, okay, containing S number of vibrators or oscillators, and this molecule, after colliding with another similar molecule, it gains excess energy. Say for example, during collision, an amount of energy equal to E joules is exchanged between them. So this molecule is becoming energized, okay, because it has gained excess energy of E joules per molecule. Okay, and according to Hinshelwood or Lindemann's theory, all this excess energy is stored in these S number of oscillators, either equally or unequally. That is not important. Okay, say for example, if I take different molecules. Now different molecules. Now uh, according to Maxwell's Boltzmann distribution, not all the molecules upon collision will gain same amount of energy. So when two molecules collide, in some case a very low energy may be exchanged between two molecules, and in some case very large amount of energy can be exchanged between the two molecules. So energy E transferred between the two molecules may be very less, or it may be average, or it may be very large. For example, I have two collision between molecules of A. Okay, I have shown these molecules as rigid spheres. If the structure of these molecules may be very complex like this, I have simply shown them as rigid spheres. So when these molecules collide, a small amount of energy may be exchanged between these two molecules. The same amount of energy may not be exchanged when another two molecules of A collide with each other. Okay, when the another two molecules of A collide with each other, some other energy epsilon 2 may be exchanged between the two molecules. Similarly, when another pair of molecules may be colliding, maybe E epsilon 3 energy may be exchanged between the molecules. So the amount of energy exchanged between the two molecules on collision will not be identical for all collision. Okay, so the energy exchanged or the energy distribution will follow a Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution. And suppose if I want to calculate the fraction of molecules, having energy between epsilon and epsilon plus d epsilon is given by, okay, as I already told you, when two molecules collide, same amount of energy cannot be exchanged. So what is the fraction of the molecules that have excess energy between epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon? Okay, and that is given by, and that was obtained by Hinshelwood, that is given by f of epsilon. So the fraction of the molecules having energy between epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon, fraction f, which depends on this energy epsilon, is given by the Hinshelwood's equation, which we will not derive of course, is equal to 1 by s minus 1 factorial, where s represents the number of oscillators or vibrators present inside the molecules, into epsilon, that is the energy in quotient, under quotient, divided by Boltzmann constant into temperature whole to the power s minus 1 into 1 by Boltzmann constant into temperature into e to the power minus epsilon divided by Boltzmann constant Kb into T into d epsilon into d epsilon. So this represents the fraction of the molecules. Okay, that is the total the fraction of the molecule means molecules having energy between epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon divided by the total molecule, that is called fraction. So the fraction of the molecules having energy in this range is given by this equation that was obtained by Hinshelwood. Okay, this equation may be understood much clearly if I plot the Boltzmann distribution. So here I have plotted energy or the fraction of the molecule, and in the y-axis I am plotting energy. And we all know that in most of the case this distribution, the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution, will be something like this. So most of the molecules will have energy that is nearly equal to the average energy, and you have less number of fraction of the molecules having very high energy, and you have a small fraction of the molecules which are having very low energy. So most of the molecules, a large fraction of the molecules, will have energy much close to the average energy. Okay, so this fraction means, suppose if I have energy epsilon here and epsilon plus d plus epsilon here, so how many molecules are having energy between these two values, epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon? This fraction is given by this equation. Okay, so this is how we interpret equation 1. Now let us try to understand this graph and this equation in greater detail. Now if there is a threshold energy called as epsilon star, which may be activation energy, okay, so this is the minimum energy that has to be exchanged when the two molecules collide, so that the molecule becomes really energized. So when two molecules collide, I told you there is an exchange of energy. So after exchange of energy, one of the molecule is said to be energized. If it has to be sufficiently energized, it has to acquire a minimum amount of energy called as activation energy. And if E star or epsilon star represents such activation energy or threshold energy, you can clearly observe that all the molecules or the fraction of the molecules having energy greater than this epsilon star, that is to the right side of epsilon star, they are all sufficiently energized and they may easily get converted into an activated molecule. And all the fraction of the molecules which are having energy lesser than epsilon star are not sufficiently energized, so they may not immediately get converted into activated molecule. Such molecules which are not sufficiently energized, they may have to undergo several collisions, further collisions to become energized. So until then, only those molecules which are having energy greater than epsilon star contributes to the rate of the reaction. So let me go to the first step of the mechanism of Hinshelwood, where he proposed that when the molecules A and A collide, it forms A star plus A. Rate constant of the forward process is K1, rate constant of the backward process is K minus 1. So when this collision takes place, there is an exchange of energy, okay, a small amount of energy, say I will take it as epsilon, and those collision in which this epsilon exceeds epsilon star, then only an energized molecule is formed. Therefore only those collision in which E is or epsilon is greater than epsilon star contributes to this reaction, that is, it contributes to K1. So all these molecules which are having energy greater than E star, they contribute to the forward process and therefore they contribute to this rate constant K1. If I take this small region where you have a small distribution, part of the distribution between epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon, so all this molecule in this range, they contribute, okay, or they yield or provide a small contribution to the rate constant K1. Say for example, the contribution of this molecules in this range of energy, they contribute a small value to the rate constant, that is dk1. Similarly, if I take a range here, suppose if I take the range epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon here, so all the molecules which are having energy in this range, they also contribute a small number dk1 to the rate constant. So if I add all these small numbers dk1 plus dk1 plus dk1, small numbers, the L1 atmosphere, if I add all of them, that would give the total K1. So all these to the right side of epsilon star, they contribute to the rate constant K1, and the fraction of the molecules falling in a particular energy range, they themselves contribute a very small number dk1 to the overall rate constant K1. So this fraction, therefore, okay, the based on our explanation and argument, the fraction f of epsilon in this equation is or can be therefore written as the ratio of dk1 divided by k minus 1, where dk1 is the contribution made by the molecules falling in this range, or the fraction of the molecules falling in this range, to the overall rate constant K1. So this f of epsilon is nothing but dk1 by k minus 1, where dk1 is a small value of k1 and k minus 1 is of course the rate constant of the opposite process. So we can rewrite equation 1 as dk1 by k minus 1 is equal to 1 divided by s minus 1 factorial into epsilon divided by kb into t to the power s minus 1 into 1 by kb into t into e to the power minus epsilon divided by kb into t. Okay, so this equation number 2 is dealing with this small range of energy between epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon. This is nothing but the fraction f of epsilon. So this equation is concerned with only those molecules having energy between epsilon and epsilon plus d plus epsilon, which contributes a small value dk1 to the overall rate constant. So if I add all such small contribution, that is if I apply the integration over the entire range, then that would give the overall rate constant. So when I am applying the integration, what should be the limit? The limit should be epsilon star. The lowest limit is epsilon star, because only those molecules having energy greater than epsilon star contributes to the reaction. All those molecules which have gained energy less than epsilon star do not contribute. So the lower limit for the integration is epsilon star. The upper limit theoretically would be epsilon infinity, which is nothing but infinite energy. So the overall rate constant K1 is obtained by integrating this equation 2 between the two limits epsilon star, where epsilon star is the activation energy, up to infinity, or epsilon infinity. So let us integrate equation number 2 between the two limits. Integrating equation 2 between the limits, so we get integration dk1 divided by k minus 1, which is k is a rate constant, it is a constant, so we can write it as 1 by k minus 1 into integration of dk1. Integration of dx is x, so this can be written as k1 by k minus 1 is equal to integration from lower limit is epsilon star, that is the activation energy per molecule, into maximum limit is infinity, or I will take it as epsilon infinity, which is nothing but infinity of 1 by s minus 1 factorial into epsilon by kb into t into, sorry, to the power s minus 1 into 1 by kb into t into e to the power minus epsilon by kb into t. Okay, this integration is solved by making some approximation, that if epsilon star divided by kb into t, when I apply the limits, the upper limit is e infinity, which is nothing but infinity, and the lower limit is epsilon star. So when I am applying the lower limit, that is epsilon star by kb into t here, if this is much greater than 1, and this is true in most of the case, at normal temperatures T, epsilon star by kb into T will be usually greater than 1. Okay, so if this is greater than 1, then the integration in equation 3 can be approximated and written as, so we are making some approximation by assuming that this condition epsilon star by kb into t is much greater than 1, and which is generally true in most of the circumstances. So the equation 3 can be simplified by some approximation and written as k1 by k minus 1 will be equal to 1 by s minus 1 factorial into epsilon star divided by kb into t to the power s minus 1 into e to the power minus epsilon star divided by kb into t. So this is the ratio of k1 by k minus 1. Okay, therefore k1, rate constant k1, remember we are interested in finding out an expression for k1, a theoretical expression for k1, because in Lindemann theory the main problem we had was in estimating the value of k1. So we are interested in the value of k1. Therefore k1 is equal to k minus 1 into 1 by s minus 1 factorial into epsilon star divided by kb into t to the power s minus 1 into e to the power minus epsilon star divided by kb into t. Okay, this is the expression for rate constant k1. Let us make some further simplification in this equation. So what is k minus 1? Let us try to understand. If I again write the first step of the Hinshelwood's mechanism, okay, K1 is the rate constant involved for the energization process, whereas K minus 1 is the rate constant involved for the de-energization process. See here, the forward process involves the energy factor. Why? Because for the forward reaction to take place, which is nothing but an energization step, the molecule should at least acquire a minimum energy called activation energy epsilon star. So the forward process is controlled by an activation energy. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ forward process ಆಗಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ molecule should pass through an energy barrier. The minimum height of the barrier is epsilon star. So the forward process is controlled by a energy which is called as an activation energy. But whereas the backward process, the reverse of the first step, is not involving any type of energy, because here no activation is taking place. It is actually de-energization process. So the energy by itself can easily lose its energy. So there is no sort of energy of activation that is involved for the backward process. So backward process does not require any energy. It actually involves the losing of energy by the molecule. So the rate constant of the de-energization process can be written as k minus 1 is equal to z minus 1, according to collision theory, z minus 1 into e to the power minus energy, activation energy 0 divided by k into t. This is collision theory. K minus 1 is equal to z minus 1 into e to the power minus e by kt, where e is activation energy, but for the backward process activation energy is 0. So we can write k minus 1 is equal to z minus 1. So according to collision theory, the rate constant for the de-energization process k minus 1 is nothing but equal to the number of collisions here, that is z minus 1. And also one can easily argue that z1 is equal to z minus 1. What do you mean by z1? Z1 is the number of collisions per unit time per unit volume for the forward process, and z minus 1 is the number of collision per unit time per unit volume for the reverse process. If you see carefully in this process, the molecules that are involved in the forward step as well as in the backward step are one and the same. In both these sides of the process you have molecules A, they are one and the same. The only difference is here we have energized molecule, here you have normal molecule. So one can expect that because both the molecules are same in both forward and reverse step, the number of collisions the molecules undergo per unit volume, per unit second or per unit time should be the same for both forward as well as backward process. The number of collision between the molecules is same. So we can easily prove that z1 should be equal to z minus 1. So based on this comparison, k minus 1 is z minus 1 and z minus 1 is equal to z1. So we can prove that k minus 1 is nothing but equal to z1. Therefore equation 5 can be written as k1 is equal to z1 into 1 by s minus 1 factorial into epsilon star divided by kb into t to the power s minus 1 into e to the power minus epsilon star divided by kb into t. So this is the expression for k1 that is obtained by Hinshelwood for this particular process. Okay. Now if we compare this with the expression for k1 predicted by Lindemann, that is according to collision theory. Okay. So according to Lindemann, that is nothing but the collision theory. According to Lindemann, the value of k1, that is as per the collision theory, is k1 is equal to z1 into e to the power minus epsilon star divided by kb into t. Okay, so k1 is given by this expression, which is the collision theory, that is given by Lindemann. And in equation 6 we have the value of k1 that is predicted by Hinshelwood. So if you compare these two equations 6 and 7, okay, because both represent k1, in the RHS you can see that the term z1 and e to the power minus epsilon star by kbt are common for both the equations. So in the Hinshelwood equation for k1 you have an extra term, okay, that is 1 by s minus 1 factorial into epsilon star by kb into t to the power s minus 1. Therefore the Hinshelwood value for k1 is greater than the Lindemann value for k1 by a factor of 1 by s minus 1 factorial, okay, into epsilon star divided by kb into t to the power s minus 1. And for a reasonable values of epsilon star, temperature and s, it can be seen that the value of this is roughly 10 to the power 6, which is very high. So for reasonable values, if I substitute some average values or reasonable values for s, epsilon star and temperature, the value of this factor is roughly 10 to the power 6. So the value of k1, rate constant k1 predicted by Hinshelwood is roughly 10 to the power 6 times greater than the value that was predicted by Lindemann's theory. So if I again go back to this expression, a half is equal to k infinity divided by k infinity 1 divided by k1. So the value of a half predicted by the Hinshelwood theory now is 10 to the power 6 times lesser than the value of a half predicted by Lindemann. So Hinshelwood theory or mechanism is successful in predicting a much lower value of a half compared to Lindemann's theory. So the limitation of Lindemann's theory is overcome by Hinshelwood theory, where it predicts a much higher value of k1. So this is the success of Hinshelwood theory, and the main highlight of Hinshelwood theory is it distinguishes the molecule into two types, okay. One is the energized molecule and the other is a activated molecule. So this is about Hinshelwood's theory. Though this theory is successful in theoretically predicting a much higher value of a half, this theory is having certain limitations. So what are those limitations? Let us understand. Okay, the success of the theory depends on the comparison of the value that is obtained by theory and obtained by experiment. So here we have such quantity, that is a half. So let us try to compare the value of a half predicted by Hinshelwood theory with the value of a half obtained experimentally. It was observed that the experimental value of a half and the theoretical value of a half predicted by Hinshelwood theory would be same if we substitute the value of s, okay, the value of s, that is the number of vibrators, as equal to half of the number of vibrators that exist in a molecule. For example, if I take a molecule something like this, okay, I have some complicated molecule like this, and for example s is equal to 10. So there are 10 different vibrators or oscillators present in the molecule, okay. But it is experimentally observed that even though the number of vibrator for this molecule is s is equal to 10, the match between the experimental value and the theoretical value is obtained when we substitute s as s is equal to 5, that is only half of the value of s. So if I substitute s is equal to 5 here, okay, then the value of a half obtained experimentally and that predicted by Hinshelwood would give the same result. So why the value of s should be taken only the half of the actual value, okay, the actual value is s is equal to 10, but the experimental and the theoretical values give the same answer only if we substitute s as half of the original value. The reason for this observation is not answered by Hinshelwood theory. That is one important limitation of the Hinshelwood theory. So the value of S that okay gives best agreement between the theoretical and experimental values of A half, okay, or A 1 by 2, the value of S that gives the best agreement between the theoretical value and the experimental value was obtained, is obtained by the value of S that gives the best agreement between the theoretical and experimental values of A half is only half of the S value. Okay, so the value of S half that gives the best agreement between the theoretical and experimental values is only the half of the S value. So even though there are S number of vibrators in a molecule, when I substitute S by 2 as the number of vibrators, it would give the best result. The answer for this the explanation for this observation is not given by Hinshelwood's theory. The second limitation, okay, still the problem we had with the Lindemann's theory continues here. Okay, even though the first part of the problem of Lindemann's theory is simplified or overcome in Hinshelwood theory, but the second part of the problem remains as such. Hinshelwood theory cannot explain the deviation of 1 by K1 versus 1 by A from linearity. So according to Lindemann, 1 by K1 versus 1 by A should have been a straight line, but what it has been observed that it is not a straight line. Of course it is a straight line only at lower concentration. At higher concentrations it deviates from linear behavior. Okay, so this is the theoretical, okay, this is the theoretical, whereas this is the experimental. So Hinshelwood theory cannot answer this limitation. Even the Hinshelwood theory predicts that 1 by K1 versus 1 by A should be a straight line. Therefore, it is unable to explain this deviation. So these are the two important limitations of Hinshelwood theory. To overcome the limitations of this theory, further theories, okay, were proposed, which is nothing but the modification of either Lindemann's theory or Hinshelwood theory. So you have two important theories called as RRK theory and its modification or extension called as RRKM theory, which gives somewhat better explanation than Hinshelwood or Lindemann's theory. We will not go into those theories here as they are not in your syllabus. So we will wind up our discussion about unimolecular reaction, gaseous reaction, with the explanation of Lindemann and Hinshelwood. Okay, so with this we conclude about the kinetics of unimolecular gaseous reaction. Thank you.